Finishing off our Wednesday episode of Wrestling Reality. Happy to have him back. It's been a while. The reality, according to the super genius Mark Madden, it's presented by J&D Waterproofing and Tootsie's Diner, a great tag team now, these two. Tootsie's Diner, of course, family-owned diner specializing in breakfast foods, lunch, and catering. They're always very nice to bring in breakfast to Mark and I, which we're looking forward to. They are great food, great people. So if you're ever in Coriopolis, I encourage you to do so.
That tag team's even better than the Revival, Justin.
And the other half of that team is
the Revival's like heels across all the promotions, aren't they?
They are.
Everybody busts their chops. It's pretty funny.
Oh, and from what I've heard, they carry that. They carry that into their behind the scenes in terms of how they hold themselves, which some people like, some people don't. And J&D Waterproofing, of course, they specialize in foundation repair and waterproofing, also providing other home improvements such as windows, roofing, siding, mold abatement, and, of course, full wall anchors. Make sure you call them 1-800-VERY-DRY. Tell Joe or Sean that Justin and Mark sent you. Mark, good to see you.
Good to be seen.
How's your travels recently?
Well, I saw Dio without Dio in Chicago. I saw Queen without Freddie Mercury in Cleveland. So
how's Adam Lambert?
He's excellent.
Yeah.
He has that, that campy, fake kind of vibe, as well as a great voice. I mean, people know him, obviously, from American Idol. And the original Dio lineup has a guy named Andrew Freeman, who used to sing for George Lynch and Lynch Mob. And he really hits all the same notes as Ronnie does. Needless to say, it's not the same, but it's still very good. At this point, I mean, how many groups are out there? And never mind the tribute acts where, you don't have original members. Look at Foreigner with only the guitar player, Mick Jones, and sometimes he doesn't even show up for the live gigs. People just want to hear the songs at this point. A lot of people have forgotten even who was in these bands in the first place, although you never forget Freddie Mercury or Ronnie Dio.
I've seen Leonard Skinner a couple times, and I can't keep the roster straight anymore. The only tribute band that I've ever paid a ticket to go see was at the Hard Rock here in Pittsburgh a few years ago. I'm a huge AC/DC fan, and I saw Back in Black.
Any good?
It was very good. The singer did a really good job.
Did they do Bon or Brian Johnson?
The singer was more of a Brian Johnson.
But you can still do the Bond songs that way.
You can, but everything from his look, he wore the, he was he kind of looked like Meatloaf trying to dress like Brian Johnson.
He had the flat cap, stuff like that.
Yes, that and seeing Journey a few years ago, where their lead singer, the Filipino guy,
Ariel Pineda,
he's from a tribute band, I think.
Yep,
yeah.
Really good too.
Very good, very active on the stage.
And hey, these guys that own the names, these various bands, they have the right to make a living.
Yeah.
So I don't blame anybody. The weird one's going to be. There's two Dio bands out there. The one I saw was the guys from the first three albums, Vivian Campbell and Vinny Appice on guitar and drums, respectively. But the guys who were on the Dio albums after that in Ronnie's group, and his wife backs these guys, Dio Disciples. And they're supposed to go on tour next year, fronted by a hologram of Ronnie Dio.
I don't get the hologram
Now,
thing.
that'll be weird. I won't go to see that.
I don't get the hologram thing. I'm actually surprised that WWE hasn't done more with, I'm surprised they haven't had, a Paul Bearer hologram walking down WrestleMania aisle with Undertaker.
I'm surprised Buddy Rogers isn't U.S. champion.
That's a good one. Mark, you could when you're tired of being here and talking to people like me and talking to the hoi polloi.
I'm tired of being everywhere.
Well, when you finally cashed in on your exhaustion, you should go host a music show on Sirius. People don't realize beyond your wrestling and your soccer, you're.
Oh no, I actually prefer
just casual talk.
Wrestling. Excuse me, I prefer my era of music, late '60s through the early '90s. I prefer listening to that and talking about that almost over anything. Even at this point, including soccer and hockey and wrestling.
Well, we're going to talk a little wrestling.
Because they all suck.
Is that what you think of the new merger between Global Force Wrestling and TNA Impact Wrestling?
What's the difference? They might as well merge with Smoky Mountain while they're at it. What's the point? It's like taking one pile of excrement and tossing it on top of another pile of excrement and suddenly expecting this bigger pile of excrement to not stink.
Would you agree with me, and I said this before, Jeff Jarrett has got to be one of the, if not the most resilient guy in modern-day pro wrestling.
A survivor.
I say resilient.
Well, he came out of that Memphis environment where the way they always ran Memphis was, okay, here's what the company's going to make, i.e. me, Jeff Jarrett. I'm going to keep that, and then we'll divide up the rest among the boys. It's not quite that way in Global Force because you have contracts you have to adhere to, but I hear the contracts are very one-sided, easy for the company to get out of, and very low paying.
And not to mention, from what we're hearing, the contracts also include, okay, you can take X amount of outside bookings, but we get a percentage of that revenue.
Which is wrong.
That's ridiculous.
It's wrong, but wrestlers these days are such marks to be on TV that they go for it.
I don't know. I would. Too bad these wrestlers don't have business managers. A former.
If they did, Jeff wouldn't hire them.
That's very true. Former GFW and TNA, and now a former WWE NXT guy, Austin Aries. Since I've last talked to you, Mark, Austin Aries was released by WWE. He was, of course, in the 205 Live Cruiserweight show, which I've been very vocal about my mediocre thoughts of.
It stinks.
Yeah, it does.
And once first off, there's two sides to the Austin Aries story. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, he's a 5'7" over-the-hill male stripper. And what he did in TNA, where Christy Hemme mangled his ring introduction, and he stuck his crotch in her face by climbing to the second rope and trapping her, he should have been fired immediately for that. I can't believe they tolerated that. And I can't believe the wrestling media, which picks its spots, I can't believe the wrestling media didn't make a bigger deal of it.
I've never seen the big deal about him. I know he's talent. I know he can work, but I don't see the big draw.
When I say, Justin, he looks like a 5'7" over-the-hill male stripper. His look is just so, it's either bad or cliched or any number of demeaning adjectives. His work's okay. His promos are okay, but the most you can describe him as is okay. That's it. I respect him for not wanting to get pigeonholed as a cruiserweight in WWE, because once that happens there, it's a death sentence. In the old days, WCW, you could rise above that, and even if you didn't, they featured their cruiserweights on the primary programming to a great degree. But in WWE, once you're cruiserweight, you're dead. And that's why Sasha Banks, when she did that little angle where she kind of dropped down to the cruiserweight division, I'm glad she didn't stay there too long, because that would have, marked her as well.
Well, and that's what I keep, along with the fact that once they label you inferior, that you're 205 or less, and that some of the people in the audience are bigger than you. It's also
you know what the Young Bucks build themselves as now? 206 pounds.
Very good by them. But it's also, as you said, in WCW, the cruiserweights gave you something. You weren't going to see Kevin Nash doing what they were doing in the main event. So there was a nice compliment to each other. You can see 260-pound Kevin Owens in the main event do some of the same moves that the cruiserweights could do. I don't know. I don't really.
And the cruiserweights, like I said, were on Nitro in featured spots.
Yeah.
You still get the cruiserweights, on WWE's main programming once in a while, but the announcers almost kind of like talk down to it.
Yeah.
It's made very clear that this is a poor relation to the main WWE programming. It just. To be honest, they did everything I thought they would with it. They've mangled it.
Yeah. Well, the cruiserweights at WCW were pace setters. Yeah, and here they.
But now here, devil's advocate. Where's Aries going to get a job? What's he going to do now?
Well, that's a good question. He has a book out, and I know a few months.
Oh, can't wait to read that. That just shows that every friggin'. I mean,
next time you come in, you joke we're going to read passages from it.
Austin Aries has a book out. AJ has a book out. I mean, everybody in wrestling has a book out, no matter how insignificant their contributions were.
You're just bitter you didn't ghostwrite it.
Please. I ghostwrote one, and it was a New York Times bestseller for 7 weeks.
What I was getting at is when he was doing his book tour, I think he said in an interview on Sirius Radio.
He did a book tour.
Yes. Yes.
Dear Jesus.
He didn't stop here, though.
Well, that would have been certainly a much. I mean, I will say this.
We opted for virtual instead, and that didn't work out well either.
Austin Aries doing a book and doing a book tour is not surprising in an era where the internet has totally taken over wrestling.
To be fair, I don't know if it was. I don't think it was so much of about his wrestling career. I'm actually googling it. I think it was about fitness or food or something. Hang on.
What's the subtitle? How to be a 5'7" male stripper?
Austin Aries food fight book.
Yeah, I'm sure it's terrific.
That's what it's called. Food fight book. My plant powered journey. From the bingo halls to the big time. That's what it says.
I will say this. And back to the bingo halls. I will say this: he's in better health than I am.
Yeah, well. That's
not hard to do, but I'm sure he is.
Well, you're gonna feast on some fine, delicious Tootsies soon. Here's another one that's interesting. Mark, will be have you. O.J. Simpson in the news. He just got granted parole, and we'll leave it there.
Let me jump in.
Go ahead.
He should be on parole.
Why?
The crime he committed, taken in and of itself, he was in jail too long sentenced too long in the first place.
No.
He should have been paroled a long time ago. Should have served much less time. I mean, hey, he murdered 2 people and beat the system. It happens all the time. Plenty of people are on the streets who should be in jail, and plenty of people are in jail who are innocent. I mean,
the reality shows waiting there for him.
Just because OJ's trial was televised means everybody knows about it. But I mean, I feel for the relatives of the people who got killed, except Fred Goldman, who we've heard far too much from. But just stuff like that happens.
Well, O.J. Simpson, Bruce Pritchard, who worked in WWF for a long time, he actually said on his podcast recently that in 1996 there was WWF, whatever, starting to move the wheels about having an O.J. Simpson match against Roddy Piper, and that where Piper was going to beat the hell out of Simpson and thus give the public their revenge of seeing Simpson give his comeuppance.
Gee, wonder why they decided not to do that.
Well, they went against that as they were told they were probably never going to sponsor again. If you remember that same year,
would Roddy have done half blackface again?
If you remember that same year, Roddy ended up instead fighting in a Hollywood backlot brawl where he disrobed Dustin Rhodes as Goldust, and they actually used the OJ footage cam as part of the whole thing. Well, then, also related to OJ, Kevin Eck, who's a former WWE creative writer and who was the editor of WCW magazine in 2000, Kevin Eck just blogged.
I don't remember Kevin Eck at all.
He was the editor of the magazine at that time, and he did a couple years with WWE creative recently.
Why would I not remember him in WCW?
I don't know. I'll show you a picture. I don't know.
No, don't do that.
He's from Baltimore. I don't know if it matters anything. Anyways, Kevin Eck just blogged recently that in 2000, Vince Russo supposedly had proposed the idea internally about having OJ come on pay-per-view and do a lie detector test, and that would help boost ratings and publicity for WCW because apparently OJ had said that he would take a lie detector test and the money would go towards finding the real killer. But obviously that didn't happen.
I did not hear that discussed at all.
You were there then.
I was there, yeah. I did not hear that discussed at all.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it wasn't,
Right.
because I wasn't privy to everything, but I didn't hear about that.
I would love to hear you commentate a polygraph test.
An OJ polygraph
An
test.
OJ polygraph test.
I told you. I told you didn't do it. Oh, I would have been, in my wrestling guys behind the mic, I would have been very much pro OJ. Innocent till proven guilty, Shivani, and he was proven innocent. How dare you, Shivani? This man's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, a Heisman Trophy winner.
Mark, I have a new Saturday episode of the show now, and coming up on this Saturday, a guy that worked in WCW and worked closely with some pals of you. His name's Neil Pruitt, and a lot of people may not know that name, but Neil Pruitt, the official voice of the NWO. Remember that famous, the following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order?
Those were brilliant. Those were some of the best promos because the way they were filmed and the way they were placed in the broadcast set them apart from, the actual show Nitro, and it really did make them seem like an invading army. I believe the NWO invasion will go down in history as one of the last times that disbelief was legitimately suspended by a lot of people.
Absolutely.
People wanted to believe that was the WWE's invading army, that they were going to see something they never saw before, and those paid for by the New World Order PSAs were a big, big part of that, and they were so well done.
To prepare for the interview with Neil, I was watching last night the January 97 pay-per-view. The NWO Sold Out, where it was the NWO all-sponsored show. Bischoff and Ted on commentary. Nick Patrick
is the ref. The one where Jeff Katz did interviews?
Thank you for bringing this up. Jeff Katz, they're trying to find Miss NWO. And
Jeff Katz was like 19 or something.
I thought maybe 7. He was super young, and he had these awkward questions to the...
EB loved him.
Apparently, because it was the most cringeworthy. They cut in between every match to Jeff Katz.
Is that the one where Bischoff made out with some ugly woman?
The girl, the lady they crowned Miss NWO, and they put her on a toilet seat as her throne.
Yeah.
They were all sitting on Harley Davidsons, and
well, they got that from the Howard Stern pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was.
Howard's throne on one of his pay-per-views was a toilet seat.
Yeah, it was pretty cringeworthy, and the WCW guys had no music, but they had Neil Pruitt on the PA system announcing the WCW guys. For example, the first WCW guy to come out was Chris Jericho, where the official introduction was in the Neil Pruitt voice, which I'm not going to be able to do. Somewhere north of the border. Chris, I should have stayed in hockey, Jericho.
Well, yeah, that pay-per-view was cringeworthy. And there were a lot of things that added up to the downfall of the NWO, because let's face it, that came far too soon. That angle should be able to run successfully and draw heat and make money a lot longer than it did. Now,
well, it became the bigger brand. NWO.
It did. And at some point, maybe that should have been the brand. Maybe it should have knocked WCW out of the park and won some kind of winner-take-all match. But the NWO started to lose its potency pretty quickly. And Sold Out was, one contributing factor because it was cringeworthy. It was anything but cool. The NWO was supposed to be the king cool of WCW, and that pay-per-view, like you said, was anything but cool. I mean, an ugly woman sitting on a toilet seat, her throne. I mean, come on, that's not what NWO fans, because there were so many NWO fans wanted to see.
I would think if it's an NWO, if it's a cool NWO, because NWO was cool, they were still very cool. I would think you'd have all the girls be porn stars.
Yeah, like they're sleazy, but they're hot.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like sitting in bikinis on Harleys. Why?
They would not have been hard to find.
Not at all.
But like the NWO, I always talk about this, and I've written about it. That angle was so well done until the moment Hogan turned. And I know people look at that as the defining moment of the NWO, and it certainly was a defining moment for Hogan because, he needed that for his career. It gave the boost. It put the NWO over the top for that moment. It gave the invading army from WWE that much more credibility. But then the angle became all about Hogan. Before that, it was the invading army. It was a team thing. It was Kevin and Scott, and other guys, eventually came in that made sense, and a lot that didn't. Teddy was the money behind it, DiBiase.
Right.
But after that, the angle became all about Hogan. And he usurped the heat and injected it into his own career, and it just was badly misplaced. The minute Hogan got in the NWO, it was doomed to fail. I know people think that's ridiculous, but if you look at the chronology, the timeline, that's how it went.
Well, and I'm going to ask you something. Obviously, Hogan fit on the sense of, he fit he's a former WWF guy, so it's the whole thing of Vince sending these guys the invasion. But to your point of saying it then became all about Hogan, do you think that how successful or not successful would it have been if it wasn't Hogan, if it was Sting that was the third person? Would it have worked more, you think? I mean, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but...
It would have worked more if it would have been Hogan, but he wouldn't have had creative control, which he did. Like that thing, you can refresh my memory here, the Starrcade where, Hogan got Patrick to not count fast when, it was supposed to be a fast count so Bret Hart could restart the match and Sting could win the world title.
Right.
Okay, they had a count that wasn't fast. They restarted the match anyway. It made Hart and Sting look like boobs.
It was the worst. You have this gem in Bret Hart coming off of what he just came off of. It was a terrible
That was the one time that they had to really take the NWO angle past Hogan and, get other guys legitimately involved as baby faces that were going to give WCW finally at long last its comeback against the NWO. And Hogan's behind-the-scenes machinations with Nick Patrick. And Nick Patrick, I love the guy, should have been fired immediately. And I would have gone to Hogan and say, look, we can't fire you. We can't fire Nick Patrick. But just, Hogan made things a mess.
Do you know why Nick Patrick was cast and chosen to be the NWO ref? Why
I don't know. I don't know.
No,
maybe he was just standing there when they thought of it.
I didn't know if it was something as simple as
Remember,
that.
he used to wear, in the NWO PSAs, he used to wear a mask to referee.
A ski mask, right. Well, I didn't know if it was something as simple as he was just the first guy that they saw when they said, hey, we need a ref, or if it was because Nick Patrick's also bigger than most refs. So
right.
I didn't know if it was a size thing. They wanted their ref to look bigger than Randy, whatever the senior WC.
Pee Wee Anderson.
Yeah.
And Charles Robinson was there, too. Yeah, maybe that's why.
I thought maybe it was a size thing. I don't know.
But Nick had more personality, visibly, than most refs, so maybe that was why.
Cool. Of course, Mark, thank you as always for coming in. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkMaddenX. Brought to you by Tootsie's Diner, the fine people in Coriopolis, family-owned diner specializing in breakfast foods, lunch, and catering. Be sure to go in there. Mark likes the breakfast. I'm more the lunch. Either way, you can't go wrong. Be sure to tell Colleen and Mark that we sent you, in a J&D Waterproofing as well. Jumping in, J&D Waterproofing, specializing in roofing, siding. Make sure you give them a call, 1-800-VERY-DRY. Mark, give me an address. I'm getting ready to order $20 as Austin Aries book. Where do you want it delivered?
Just put it right to the garbage can. Again, everybody can do what they want. And
what will the title of your book be?
Just About Done.